Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta's health minister says changes are coming for Albertans in need of medical care and where they'll be transported to via ambulance. Canada has a new Governor General in Mary Simon. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on Simon to rein in spending. And this is the 100th anniversary of the poppy. A special memorial was set up in Lethbridge to honor our veterans who served.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro announced today that Albertans in need of medical care can now be transported to any medical facility that best meets their needs instead of automatically being taken to the emergency room of a hospital. Shandro says from 2017 to 2019, EMS ground ambulances responded to around 90,000 non-urgent events where directing patients to alternative care sites could have and should have been considered.
Now, this change means that paramedics can treat and then transport patients to a care facility, such as a hospice or community care clinic, that's equipped to help with events that are urgent but not life-threatening. For a number of years now, we've had a recurring problem with paramedics lining up in emergency departments waiting to transfer care of their patients. And it's not the right use of their skills as paramedics, and it's not the best care for the patient.
Shandro says by creating more options, this will allow EMS to transport patients by ambulance to alternate locations to help get ambulances back on the road faster. An Alberta man is about to start a long trek from Lethbridge to Edmonton to raise awareness and funds for the Lung Association of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. The 500-kilometre walk has already raised over $24,000 with a goal of $50,000. Now, this walk is also highlighting the importance of organ donation.
But we know that the people who have severe lung disease, they will need that lung transplant. And we know that there's not a lot of lungs available because lungs are something that you can only get from a deceased angel donor, and that it's important for people to have that conversation and so that their family knows that if they're ever in a situation where they are able to donate, and not many people actually end up in that situation, but we know that if someone's in that situation, we don't want their family to have to be stressed about that at that time when they're having to deal with a tragedy, that their family knows what they're wanting and what their wishes are, and having that conversation beforehand is important.
This whole story, this whole journey is for Albertans, and anybody that wants to take part in that, absolutely. That's the stuff that we're really looking forward to, and reconnecting. We're going to hit some towns along the way on the other side of Calgary to Edmonton that we hit last year, so some of the same people I've been in contact with, and they're excited to see us roll through and reconnect. So all that stuff is pretty darn exciting.
The journey will start on July 7th and will end on the 23rd, which is 5 years to the day that Sadler's father received a life-saving lung transplant. Another person making a huge difference in our community is Dr. Sophie Kearneys. She's a microbiology researcher at Lethbridge College. Kearneys studies the side effects of antibiotics and is concerned about an increase in antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
We have used antibiotics since 1940, so a long time. We have selected antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and we have more and more. If we use more antibiotics, you will select more antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And this bacteria, I need to add two more things. One, they divide very quickly. So for E. coli, it will be 20 minutes, so imagine that. And the other thing is that they have a very big, high plasticity, genetic plasticity. So they can exchange genes, basically, between each other.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Sophie Kearneys and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our program. The extreme heat wave in southern Alberta last week has had a negative effect on some crops and vegetables in our region. With a lack of moisture and above seasonal values, some crops have already started to dry up. Carson Marsouk headed out to speak with one southern Alberta farmer and has more.
Crops around southern Alberta are being affected by the extreme heat that took over much of Western Canada last week. Farmers in southern Alberta say they weren't expecting this hot of temperatures this early in the season.
It brings you back to reality. Last year was probably one of the best crops we've ever had, and this year will be definitely the worst crop we've ever had.
Ian Donovan has been growing and harvesting grain near Mosley, Alberta for the last 29 years. Donovan says the 38-degree temperatures from last week has dried up most crops, with Donovan and his neighbors busy harvesting over the weekend for silage.
Last year, for instance, this field we're standing in did 11 tons to the acre dryland silage, and this year right across the road in that field there behind me made like 1.5 tons.
During a normal season, the hot temperatures usually come around mid to late July. However, most of Alberta experienced them last week, roughly 3 weeks ahead of schedule. For crops that are known to thrive in the heat, such as sugar beets, the nearly 40-degree temperatures is also having an effect on them.
Hot, dry years are often our best crops for the beets, but this kind of heat is a little bit excessive. And it's hard to keep them wet. And that's the biggest thing for us now, is just trying to keep everything wet enough.
With the drying of crops in early harvest for silage, bees and other insects that use the flowers to pollinate are beginning to dwindle in numbers.
I've got a friend who runs some leafcutter bees for canola pollination, and he's reporting some bee death due to heat as well.
Donovan adds with the early drought, many farmers around the region will be submitting insurance claims to ease the burden.
We have insurance policies in place. I mean, we have safety nets in place for agriculture. So, we are lucky in that part of the industry that at least we have something in place.
For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
This year marks the 100th anniversary that the poppy was adopted to be a symbol of remembering the veterans who gave everything to defend our country. The Lethbridge Legion met at the Mountain View Cemetery on Tuesday to honor veterans by installing headstones for those who served. Micah Quinn has those details.
Joseph Ferguson fought in the First and Second World War, and he is now the newest military member to be honored with a new gravestone from the Last Post Fund.
Really only took a year to get this headstone. There are others that I've been working on for 10 years, and I still haven't been able to find their records. But hopefully one day some clue will show up and it will click and they will get a headstone as well.
The installation of the military markers coincides with the 100th anniversary of the poppy.
It was interesting for me to find out that it was a French lady who actually instituted the whole idea of remembrance for the poppy, Anna Guerin, who was impressed by the poem in Flanders Fields, which we have all heard excerpts from over the years.
The Lethbridge Legion is instituting a hashtag called MyPoppyMemory for those who want to post a story of someone they know that is associated with the theme of the poppy.
My Poppy, hashtag social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those things are for a generation way below me. And it's that generation we really want to engage and get involved, not necessarily as members of the Legion, but even remotely, so that they have this engagement with the past, with their ancestors.
The stories from the hashtag will be collected and published by later this year and into 2022. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Raymond McGrath RCMP responded to a fatal collision involving a pedestrian on Highway 4 just north of Highway 61 on Monday. Police say in the early morning hours, a semi-tractor was headed northbound towards Lethbridge when the pedestrian was struck. The pedestrian died at the scene. The semi-truck driver and passenger were treated on scene by EMS and later released. The initial investigation indicates the pedestrian was in the driving lane of the semi when the collision occurred. A positive identification of the deceased has not yet been made. Some people on the north side of Lethbridge had an unusual and rare sighting today. A moose was on the loose. The moose could be seen wandering the streets in the neighborhoods of the Uplands, Black Wolf, Park Meadows, and in Legacy Park. A viewer by the name of Shelley captured a couple of photos and tweeted out the pictures while out on a walk earlier today. Alberta Fish and Wildlife are asking the public to give the moose some space if you see it and make sure you don't approach it. The hot temperatures across much of the prairies is wreaking havoc with our fish. Officials with the Alberta Fish and Game Association said the record temperatures have killed hundreds of fish which have been spotted in various lakes and rivers across Alberta. Provincial Fish Chair Daryl Smith says streams usually start to heat up late July to early August, but the hotter temperatures, along with the direct sun on waterways for up to 16 hours a day, has been lowering oxygen levels, which has been killing off much of our fish. The Alberta government announced a $15.5 million investment in the Calgary Zoo. The 3-year initiative will go towards the zoo's Canadian Wilds redevelopment project, which will include the river otter habitat and a new polar bear habitat. Officials say the redevelopment project will create larger habitats across a revitalized 21-acre space and will increase the Calgary Zoo's focus on Canadian Arctic species conservation.
It's significant for a lot of reasons, but when we invest in the zoo, we invest in Albertans. We invest in our education and our health, our mental health and our well-being. And it's a world, I know many of you know this, but I'm always very, very humbled by the level of conservation and the work that goes on in this place. This is a real gem in Canada. And the connections that the zoo has to zoos around the world and the work that happens is nothing short of miraculous, especially at these times.
The project is anticipated to help grow annual revenues at the zoo by $13.4 million to more than $65 million. The province says this project will create around 240 construction-related jobs and 100 permanent full-time jobs at the zoo. The chief of the Cowessess First Nation says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe attended a signing ceremony in his community on Tuesday. Cadmus Delorme says in a statement on Twitter that the ceremony was part of a transfer of control over children in care to the community.
Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Moe, and all their team didn't create this. We all inherited this today. And because of that, we have a little bit of loss of control, a little bit of loss of language, a little bit of loss of governance, a little bit of loss of our social and even our individual lives. One of the major things that happened is what you call vertical lineage pass down. If residential schools, 60s Scoop, Indian Act weren't here, Kokum would have passed down to mom. Mom would have passed down to daughter. Daughter would have passed down to granddaughter, as it should have been. But because of 4 generations of residential school, it became horizontal. Kokum had to stand beside her cousin to survive. Mom had to stand beside her sister and cousin to survive. And today, that lineage is coming back.
Cowessess is the site of a former residential school where 751 unmarked graves were discovered. Trudeau said the findings at former residential school sites have pressed Canadians to reflect on historical failures and ongoing injustices. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has appointed Mary Simon as our country's next Governor General. Simon, who is Indigenous, says her focus right now is to help with reconciliation and healing.
Indeed, my appointment comes at an especially reflective and dynamic time in our shared history. During my time as Governor General, I will work every day towards promoting healing and wellness across Canadian society. To me, that means stopping to fully recognize, memorialize, and come to terms with the atrocities of our collective past that we are learning more about each day. It means we must thoughtfully work hard towards the promise of a better tomorrow.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's appointment of Mary Simon as the country's next Governor General is sparking a range of reactions. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is among those who have welcomed Simon's appointment, calling it an important day for Canada and Indigenous peoples. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet, however, says the ceremonial role is not representative, elected, or legitimate. Nathan Obed, who leads Canada's National Inuit Organization, says he hopes Simon will lead with empathy. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on the newly appointed Governor General Mary Simon to reform the taxpayer-funded perks provided to the Governor General. Federal Director for the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, says the 5 living former Governor Generals will receive more than $18 million if they continue to collect their pensions to the age of 90, and that is, well, just too much.
These are some of the most outrageous government perks that we've covered, which is really saying a lot. And the reason all of that's happening is because the annual pension payment for a former Governor General is now about $150,000 per year. And these Governor Generals, they're eligible for it no matter how long they serve in the role. So you get these crazy type of things that happen where you have former Governor General Julie Payette, who only served for about 3 years, and she could still pocket that pension of about more than $4 million if she continues to collect it to the age of 90. So it's just completely unfair for taxpayers. And now would be the perfect time for the newly appointed Governor General to rein in those perks.
Terrazzano adds that in addition to an annual pension, former Governor Generals can submit expenses to taxpayers of just over $206,000 for the rest of their lives and up to 6 months after their deaths. According to a 2019-2020 Public Accounts of Canada, the Governor-General's annual salary is just over $302,000. American forces have been vacating Afghanistan by the thousands. It's all part of U.S. President Joe Biden's troop withdrawal. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says the danger behind that is more terrorist cells will begin forming once again, giving more control to the Taliban.
When the U.S. evacuates, what they do is they entrust that location to the Afghan government. The Afghan government has very little power or control over the Taliban, over these insurgencies. And for that reason, there obviously is and will be the threat of these insurgencies taking over. But that is, the pros and cons, the weighing out of the decision to evacuate. And that's why you have so many people who were against this evacuation, and they predicted that this is exactly what would happen.
Lisa will also have more on rescue efforts at the condo which collapsed in southern Florida. That interview is coming up after business news. Rescuers searched through fresh rubble after the last of the collapsed Florida condo building was demolished. An Israeli official who is helping with the recovery efforts says crews are now allowed into inaccessible places that were previously deemed a safety risk.
The planning was very good. We're very satisfied of the results. The remaining building collapsed into itself. It didn't occur any damage to the environment, the other buildings. It didn't damage the pile. So we would be able to get on the pile back less than 20 minutes after the demolition. The emotion is both relief and of course that we had the chance to get to a new area which was before closed, and we weren't allowed to hang inside and search inside it because there was a major risk to the rescuers. Actually, we experienced for the last, let's say, 16 hours an increase of the amount of trapped and missing that we are able to get to. And we believe that the demolition helped us to get, as I said, to a lot of new areas, and also to spread more rescuers on a wider field on the pile.
Global Affairs Canada says the remains of one Canadian citizen were found at the site. At least 3 other Canadians remain unaccounted for. At least 32 people died when the condo collapsed on June 24th. Another 113 people in total still remain unaccounted for. Conditions in southern Florida have been deteriorating as Tropical Storm Elsa took aim at the Florida Keys on Tuesday. This prompted a hurricane watch for portions of the west coast of the state.
We're not forecasting it to be a hurricane, but we did issue a hurricane watch just to illustrate the possibility that it could get to a hurricane. And again, that watch area kind of covers the Tampa Bay area, a little to the south and a little to the north of it. Looks like it's going to be paralleling the west coast of Florida today, and expected to make landfall either late tonight or during the morning hours on Wednesday. Somewhere in that Big Bend area of Florida seems to be the best bet, so north of the Tampa Bay area. We think there'll be sort of a widespread area of 2 to 4 inches with some isolated pockets of up to 6 inches. I mean, that's not crazy heavy rainfall for Florida. It can generally handle it, but there could be some localized flooding in some areas.
Well, here in our area, we saw more moisture across many parts of southwestern Alberta today with slightly cooler temperatures, and that trend will continue for a couple more days. Full weather details are coming up. So thankful for the much-needed moisture we've been receiving. Tonight, we can expect more light showers developing in Lethbridge with a low near 12. Tomorrow, a good chance of rain once again and a high near 26. Thursday, the rain should be tapering off and we should see a high of 24. A high-pressure system returns on Friday, bringing lots of sunshine and a high of 27. Saturday, mainly sunny with a high near 30. A mixture of sun and cloud is on tap for Sunday, with the mercury climbing to 31. Monday, partly cloudy with a high of 27. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 25 degrees and an average low of 10. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 1975 at 34 degrees, and the record low was only 2 degrees in 1994. The sun rose at 5:32 and set at 9:41. Let's have a look at how Wednesday is shaping up across the country now. Expect a few clouds and a high of 23 in both Victoria and Vancouver. A chance of thunder showers for both Edmonton and Calgary with a high of 25. Mainly cloudy and 25 degrees as well for both Regina and Saskatoon on Wednesday. Sunshine at 25 is on tap for Winnipeg. Toronto had a heat warning today. Tomorrow expect showers and a high of 21. Rain at 19 is expected in Ottawa on Wednesday. A slight chance of showers and 20 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, it should be mainly cloudy with a slight chance of rain and a high of 25 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Showers and 29 degrees is on tap for Halifax, Nova Scotia. A slight chance of showers and 22 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect sun mixed with cloud and a high as well near 22 degrees.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
The province announced that it is taking 50% ownership of the controversial Sturgeon refinery located northeast of Edmonton. The refinery was owned by Northwest Refining and oil sands producer Canadian Natural Resources, which also provides bitumen to the facility. The refinery began processing bitumen last year after 2 years of delays blamed on equipment failure. It has also faced criticism in the past for cost overruns. The government-owned Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission has a contract to provide bitumen to the refinery. The province has signed a restructured deal that also extends the length of its processing contract. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has officially stepped down as CEO of the company he started in his Seattle garage back in 1995. Andy Jassy, the head of Amazon's cloud computing business, will take over. Bezos will move into the role of executive chair with plans to focus on new products and initiatives. Jassy inherits the helm of a $1.7 trillion company that benefited greatly from the pandemic, but still faces challenges, including growing calls for tighter regulation. Japan is set to send another 1.1 million donated AstraZeneca doses to Taiwan this week to help the island fight its worst COVID-19 outbreak amid a struggle to get vaccines. Taiwan, which only had a handful of deaths before the latest outbreak, has seen its death toll spike to more than 700. Japan says the vaccine is set for shipment on Thursday, which is the second such shipment to Taiwan in a month. Taiwan has blamed China for interfering in its effort to buy vaccines. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 18 points on the day to finish at 20,300. The Dow was down 208 points to 34,577. The S&P 500 was down 8 points to 4344, and the Nasdaq was up 24 points to 14,664. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.79 to $73.37 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 6 cents to $3.64 US. Gold was down 5 cents to $17.9703 US an ounce, and silver was even at $26.16 US an ounce. Wheat is at $365 per metric ton, barley's at $362, canola's at $7.71, and corn is at $400 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 40 cents to $122.40, feeder cattle were up $3.58 to $160.63, and lean hogs were up $2.13 to $102.35. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $80.25 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro announced today that Albertans in need of medical care can now be transported to any medical facility that best meets their needs instead of automatically being taken to the emergency department of a hospital. Shandro says from 2017 to 2019, EMS ground ambulances responded to around 90,000 non-urgent events where directing patients to alternative care sites could have and should have been considered. We have an update into the search and rescue efforts of the Florida condo which collapsed. More than 100 people still remain unaccounted for. Our U.S. correspondent Lisa Daftari will have details for us in just a moment. But first, here a look at some of the events taking place in and around southwestern Alberta.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Exhibition Park's Smoke, Wind and Fire Barbecue Competition is taking place July 10th and 11th. Come watch top Pro-Am barbecue teams from across Canada and have an opportunity to meet a few of the pitmasters at Heritage Hall. Plus, test your skills in the Amateur Backyard Barbecue Competition. Bring your own grill and cook up your best chicken and ribs and be eligible to win. For details, visit smokewindandfire.ca. The Southern Alberta Ethnic Association is excited to present Latin Fest on Saturday, July 17th from noon to 7 p.m. at the Multicultural Center. Experience Latin flavors, culture, and fun. Enjoy delicious food, dancing, music, and so much more. Admission is free with food and beverages available for purchase. For more information, Visit saea.ca or call 403-320-1577. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The death toll from the condo collapse in South Florida has now reached 27. To talk about this in more detail is our U.S. correspondent Lisa Daftari. The mayor of Miami-Dade is still praying for a miracle.
Yeah, that's exactly what it would take to, find any survivors in this horrific, horrific nightmare. It's probably frustrating to most family members and even those who are just following this news story as to why the excavations, going through the rubble is taking such a long time. And the announcements that bodies have been recovered are very far and few between. But unfortunately, that number is going up, and people who are still unaccounted for, it's been days, and they had to raise the last remaining tower, which is extremely painful for the residents there, their family members. Some had even pets that were still in the building. This whole thing is just so horrific, and as we talked about last week, there are teams coming in from all over the world, particularly from Israel, from Mexico, bringing in their expertise to get through this rubble. So many volunteers, so many people that are following the story and are invested in getting a better outcome, hopefully.
Following a three-way video call, the leaders of Germany, France, and China have called on all parties involved in the Iran nuclear talks to seize a window of opportunity for an agreement. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's so ironic that they call this a window of opportunity. Yes, a window of opportunity to deal with a murderous regime that now has a butcher. That's his nickname as a new president. If you've been following the story, the Iranian regime had an election. Some call it a selection, obviously, because the candidates who were allowed to run were only from the regime, and they were vetted based on how well they could follow the tenets of the Islamic Republic. So their new president is at the helm. He has said that he will not meet with Biden. He said that there will be no negotiations before all sanctions are removed. And now let's remember, what good behavior are we rewarding here to sit down at the negotiating table with a partner that has not complied with any of the IAEA inspections? They have marched forward with a weapons program. They have flexed their muscles, bragging about the level of uranium enrichment. They have had, so many encounters in the seas with U.S. assets and others. So, we have no reason to sit down with a murderous regime that continues to pour money into terrorism and fund terrorists around the world. And so the Europeans and the Chinese, well, they have other agendas, and they're pushing for an Iran nuclear deal to normalize relations, to get into more business and have the economy of Iran open up to them. They're seeing, obviously, opportunities for them. But there are people here who are against the nuclear deal, and they'll continue to raise the serious issues as to why we shouldn't enter a deal with the Iranian regime.
Israeli defense officials were seeing whether Iranian forces were behind a possible attack on a cargo ship under partial Israeli ownership. Lisa, fortunately, no one was hurt as the ship was possibly hit by a missile.
Yes. So speaking of the Iranian regime and their nefarious activities on the sea, we're past the age of having these heated wars or an announcement or declaration of war, but we're seeing a lot of targeted attacks, whether it's on the seas, cyber attacks, and other ways of damaging each other's assets. And we're talking about, obviously, Israel versus the Iranian regime. Again, the U.S. and Israel being Iran's sworn enemies, the big Satan and the little Satan, as they're nicknamed by the Iranian regime. This was a cargo ship that was headed for the United Arab Emirates. It was headed for Dubai, and they are looking into or investigating whether this was in fact the Iranian regime, and there will probably be some retaliation or some exchange of words or actions in the aftermath, but they're looking into whether or not it was.
Lisa, let me ask you something. What's the sentiment like in Israel right now since new Prime Minister Bennett took over from Netanyahu? Are they still pretty confident in this Israeli government?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that comes up pretty often because Bibi Netanyahu was, the symbol of strength and this hawkish leadership that many people loved him for and some hated him for in Israel. But when it came down to national security, Bibi's reign was second to none. The way that he forcefully and very strongly and proudly stood up for Israel, its military, and its right to exist both around the world and at home. This new government has not had a moment to really let its hair down, so to speak, to have a breather. Why? Because they were thrown in the midst of an ongoing war. As you know, the ceasefire between Gaza and Israel was broken several times, and most recently this week with more fire balloons, these arson balloons, thrown into southern Israel, causing many, many fires. Again, it's very, very hot there. It's a hot summer, as always, and these fires being in this desert area are, it's not helping. They're spreading very, very quickly. And in retaliation, Israel had to go in and take out some of Hamas's depot, headquarters, and weapons arsenals. And it's ongoing. So to answer your question, when you have a government that's put in this position, against a rock and a hard spot, as they say, they have only one way to respond, and that's to defend their citizens, to defend the civilians in Israel, to defend the homeland, to defend their borders. And there's no other way around it.
Bringing things a little closer to home right now, a new poll by the Washington Post says most Americans disapprove of the job U.S. President Joe Biden is doing on immigration, as illegal border crossings smash records each and every month.
Yeah, when I read this poll, I was confused as to whether they're not happy because they want a more lax immigration policy, or they're not happy because they're looking at the crisis on the border. But to our chagrin, it's only a 51% of those who are polled that disagree or are not confident about his border plan, with 33 approving. I'm not sure what they're approving of, because it seems like we don't have a border plan. We had Kamala Harris, Vice President, go down to the border. She, of course, was entrusted with being in charge of the border. No plan has been announced. The only thing she said to the people coming from these countries is do not come. Of course, many of the people who voted for the Biden ticket, the Kamala Harris ticket, were hoping that they would have a more lax approach to immigration. But as we both know, when pragmatism and logic kick in, you cannot have all these people at the border come in. And for those who have witnessed this chaos at the border, they're talking about the fact that it's not safe with COVID, it's not safe with children getting separated from their parents, and it's not safe when you have people who are unvetted, undocumented, getting on flights, going to different states, and really spreading themselves out throughout the United States, never to be found again. Again, there have been very, very nefarious elements that have been detected at the border. A lot of people looking for a better life, but a lot of people trying to sneak in from different terror organizations, and they have, again, been named and they have been found. So there could be many, many more such instances. The only thing it goes to show is that this is a very vulnerable situation, very soft target, and we obviously have to come up with a more serious plan when it comes to immigration on the border.
Here's an interesting story. More jobless Americans are suing states for ending federal unemployment benefits early. Lisa, out-of-work Americans in Indiana, Maryland, and Texas have filed the lawsuits because they want the pandemic relief program that paid out an extra $300 a week reinstated.
Hal, all I can tell you is there are fast food chains across America with signs that say we will give you a $5,000 bonus to sign on for a minimum wage job. What does that tell us? Wow. Nobody wants to go back to work. Everyone is very comfy and cushy on these checks that are coming from the government, and nobody wants to get back on their feet. And it's a very, very, very dire situation. I'm not surprised at this lawsuit. I mean, people are, again, very used to getting the unemployment and then given the pandemic relief. So, the two checks combined give them a pretty salary. They can be doing work on the side if they'd like to make extra, pocket money. But at the same time, these checks it's just too good to pass up. So people are having a very hard time hiring. That's why you have all the sign-on bonuses, and it's gonna be a while before we get back to normal here.
Well, what's crazy about this as well, this is taxpayers' money. You got to pay this back. Just getting deeper and deeper in debt here, right?
Right. And how you make a great point. This is such a short-sighted, it's like giving them the fish rather than making them fishermen kind of thing. It's like, okay, you might eat an extra 300 a week, where I'm not scoffing at that, but go to work. And obviously the opportunity long-term will be, exponentially more.
Lisa, the hackers who have claimed responsibility for an international ransomware attack have lowered their asking price in a private conversation with a cybersecurity expert. The Revel ransomware gang is publicly demanding about $70 million to restore the data that it's holding ransom information from schools in both New Zealand and Sweden, but they've lowered their price tag now to $50 million. I'm thinking maybe we'll hold on a few more days. Maybe it'll drop down to 30 or 20 million. What do you think?
Yeah, whoever knew that ransomware, there was like haggling involved, and it's such a business where you can negotiate your price. This just underscores the importance of really firming up our infrastructures online. This is again linked back to a Russian group that we've had obviously issues with in the past, with very, very serious hacks. This is yet another one. These are private organizations that go underground and they target, very, very important online infrastructure and then ask on demand ransomware, meaning they demand ransom for to reinstate and put their servers back up. Awful, but they're using it as a weapon. They're using it as a tool, and just gives us, more of an urgency to firm up these targets.
American forces vacated Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base on Friday. Now, that was a region that was once bustling with 100,000 troops. And this is all part of U.S. President Biden's Afghan withdrawal?
Yes, so it's a very, very significant withdrawal. This is an important step in the overall withdrawal of the remaining 2,500 to 3,500 troops that are in Afghanistan, as you said, by the September 11th deadline. So this is a step-by-step process. They have evacuated this area. It was a little mini city of sorts. So whoever served in Afghanistan knows this area very, very well. And now it will be evacuated, creating a political and cultural, I should say, vacuum for now.
Will this actually fall back into the hands of the insurgents? A lot of terrorist groups and terrorist cells in the region?
Right. As I was getting the breaking news about them evacuating this air base, I thought to myself, how many days is it going to be before, terrorists are able to, as we know, Afghanistan has a major problem with the Taliban, and they've never had, a peaceful moment in the past 2 decades. Sure enough, an article came out hours later saying that it's already been looted, all the laptops, computers, anything worthwhile was taken, and they're just claiming their territory. When the U.S. evacuates, what they do is they entrust that location to the Afghan government. The Afghan government has very little power or control over the Taliban, over these insurgencies. And for that reason, there obviously is and will be the threat of these insurgencies taking over. But that is, the pros and cons, the weighing out of the decision to evacuate. And that's why you have so many people who were against this evacuation, and they predicted that this is exactly what would happen.
Wow. Facebook, Twitter, and Alphabet Inc.'s Google have warned Hong Kong that they could stop offering their services in the city if authorities proceed with planned changes to data protection laws that could make them liable for the sharing of people's information online. Tell me more.
Right. So Hong Kong might go into having this anti-doxing law, which means you can't post people's private information. So the platforms that you mentioned, by virtue of their operating their system, they offer information, right? So if you're on Facebook, or if you're on Twitter, or if you're on Google, you're looking for people's information, or you're looking at their pictures, you're looking at their birth dates and other important information. So these companies don't want to get into any legal trouble, and it's a liability, right? Why get involved if that's going to be the case? Now, obviously, this is a disturbing outcome because we know that Hong Kong is under a lot of pressure from China with censorship, with the shutting down of important vital media groups that are telling the truth. There's silencing the opposition. They're silencing any dissidents. So if we don't have these platforms there where people can become those citizen journalists and continue telling us their stories and continue telling us the truth, Hong Kong will go entirely dark, and that is the sad outcome of all of this.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
If you've ever been seriously ill, you're likely thankful for antibiotics. However, they can have side effects, and we're seeing more and more antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which has researchers busy trying to find some solutions. Joining me is Dr. Sophie Kernies, a microbiology researcher at Lethbridge College. Prior to moving to Lethbridge, she was a tenured research scientist at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, where she developed a unique experiment experimental model of a cell in the intestinal tract. Her published work is used all around the world, and we're so happy to have her with us today. Dr. Kernies, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. So first of all, can you explain what antibiotics are and how they're typically produced?
Okay, so antibiotics are molecules, drugs, like penicillin, for example, that are used to treat some bacterial infection. So it's something that is very important because if you have an infection due to a virus, for example, you will not take an antibiotic. These molecules are produced by bacteria and fungi. And so probably you have heard about penicillin produced by fungi or tetracycline. So this is what we have today on the market. Huh?
So can you tell us why we're seeing an increase in antibiotic-resistant bacteria? Why is this such a problem?
It's a big problem. And so I know that today we have a pandemic due to these coronaviruses, but the World Health Organization is basically pushing to do something to avoid having another big issue with this antibiotic resistant crisis. And so the antibiotic resistant bacteria, first, they were always present on Earth. Even Alexander Fleming, who discovered the first antibiotic, the penicillin, was able to see them and to see this problem, but it was very, very mild. This antibiotic-resistant bacteria are bacteria that are not killed anymore by the antibiotics, and it's because they have mutations. But the thing that we have today is that because we have used antibiotics since 1940, so a long time, we have selected antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and we have more and more. If we use more antibiotics, you will select more antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And this bacteria, I need to add two more things. One, they divide very quickly. So for E. coli, it will be 20 minutes. So imagine that. And the other thing is that they have a very big, high plasticity, genetic plasticity. So they can exchange genes basically between each other. So if you have one bacteria that is resistant, it can go to another kind and another kind. So it's why we have now today with this big crisis due to this antibiotic resistant bacteria.
That is fascinating stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Now, for the last number of years, you've been leading a project at Lethbridge College called the Antibiotics Alberta Plant Project, which is focused on studying plants native to Alberta to see if they can be used to produce new antibiotics, right? So what specific types of plants are you looking at or looking for?
Well, I would say, all the plants that we have here could be interesting. And the reason for that is that, as I said before, the antibiotics that we have on the market are only produced by bacteria and fungi. And everyone knows that plants have been used in a traditional way here by the First Nation people, but all over the planet, they were using the plants to treat, their disease, infection, or other disease. And so we took this approach of saying, okay, now we should take the plants and try to see if we could isolate some molecules, and that could be the next generation of antibiotics, because as we discussed before, antibiotic-resistant bacteria are a very, very big problem. And one of the solutions is to find more antibiotic, new ones, because it's kind of a run, the bacteria we will select more and more of these antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but if we have more and more new antibiotics, we can basically face these issues. So, yeah. So any plants could be a good candidate.
Definitely. So you were mentioning that they were used by Aboriginal people to treat sickness. So do we know for a fact if some of these plants were fairly effective?
So there are some reports and that's First Nation from here or from or in Canada or around the world. So yes, absolutely, they were using some plants like clover to treat certain type of infection. So of course, before we had not this test to say, oh, we have an infection that is due to a staphylococcus or something like that. So, but because wound, easy to see, it's for us, it's a bit easier than to say, okay, they have been using these plants to treat wounds. So we can suppose that this was because they were due by a bacterial infection or a fungal infection also. So we will basically, use this information and to guide a bit also research.
Okay, so how can you determine whether or not a plant will be effective?
So we have some techniques that are now in the lab. They are well established in the lab. So we have been using this technique since 2016. So when we started the project at the college in Lethbridge. And so in a very simple way, you need to put a bacteria in contact with a plant. And we have a way to find out if the bacteria is growing. It's by measuring the optical density, but it's okay. So we can put the bacteria and the plants together and follow that over a period of 18 hours, for example. And then we can see that certain plants are basically avoiding the bacteria to grow completely. So you will have the same kind of result as the one that we could get with a known antibiotic like kanamycin that we use as a positive control. So the technique is in place, and we have students helping us to do that.
That's incredible. So what kind of progress have you made so far? Have you found any molecules that could be used as antibiotics?
Yeah, we found some molecules. So this is also in collaboration with chemists. So we have a collaboration with Professor Raymond Anderson in UBC, who is helping us with this part of the project, because in science everyone has their specialty, and so the plants that are the most interesting for us are sent to UBC, and then they do the fractionation, and we were able to isolate some molecules from some interesting plants. So this is one of the contributions that we hope to get. So from all the plants that are tested positive for different bacteria, then we hope to get more and more molecules, with the hope that after we will have an antibiotic.
That's fascinating. Now, I understand that you've found a new phenotype introduced by plants. So what is it, and how can it be used for our health?
So this was observed more recently. So it was with students that are working in the lab. We observed that for certain plants, we see something that we call the clumping. Like an aggregate, like a big chunk of bacteria sticking together kind of around the plants. And so we have a student, Nadia, and who is from the University of Lethbridge. She's doing her own thesis with us, and she is very interested, and she wants to continue doing a master in the lab, so it will be great. And so we are studying this new phenotype, as it would be interesting for different applications, such as trying to remove bacteria in the water, the contamination in the water, for example, in feedlots, but also the water that we have in the river could be eventually more clean with plants that are clumping, the bacteria, maybe over application in cosmetics. So this will be some opening for the future.
Right. Now, we're of course in southern Alberta, which is, agriculture is a huge industry here. So can you tell us about some local plants that apparently contain phytobiotics, which can be used to naturally promote growth in certain farm animals?
Yeah, so this is another. So we have different direction in the lab, and one of the direction is the phytobiotics, because basically, so to give a very quick definition, there are plant extracts that have some activities, and so we are looking always for antibiotic activities. So it's known that some plants like oregano or thyme are used to prevent the infection, and we want to basically bring some new phytobiotics from the plants that are growing in Alberta, but also the plants that are given to the animals. And the reason for that is that the farmers don't have access to antibiotics since 2018 to prevent the infection as they were doing before, which is causing quite of some issues, because the antibiotics are helping them to prevent infection and also to promote the growth of the animals. So by finding, and we have many plant extracts that are active against, for example, Staphylococcus aureus, that is one of the bacteria that they want to control. We want to bring that to the farmers, that they can continue to produce the food, the food animals, or to produce the proteins that we need to feed us, basically. Yeah? So this can be an interesting project to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Dr. Kernes, your research also has the possibility of using plants to make natural preservatives for cosmetics. So which plants would be used for this, and what is it about them that would act as a preservative specifically for cosmetics?
So yeah, so cosmetics. So we are in collaboration with a small cosmetic company in Alberta, and so we are thinking and exchanging this problem that they have. Cosmetics is we put makeup and cream, and so we basically put your hands on the cream and put that on your face, and your hands are containing a lot of microbes. So basically it will contaminate the product, that can have some effect on the life shelf of the product, and also can eventually cause some infections. So they are using preservatives in their products like paraben, but we want to try to find some more natural approach for that. So bringing the plants that we have found in the lab that contain some antibiotic activities to them, and putting that in their product. So we hope that in the very near future, we will be able to bring that and have a line of cosmetics containing some natural product coming from Alberta. So this could serve the cosmetic here, but after that, maybe a bit wider around the world.
Oh yeah, well, I would be all about that, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's what the people want, to go more natural, not having some chemicals that can cause some issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So any idea how long this process would take to find these, natural effective antibiotics? How long would that take?
Well, depending. If it is an antibiotic that, like penicillin, for example, just to give you an idea, for Alexander Fleming, it took him 12 years. Which was, the first thing was because, this was the starting point. So he had to convince people. But, and we see with coronaviruses, with the vaccine, it takes time to put a drug on the market, because we want to make sure that it's really, really safe. So maybe it will take, normally it's about 10 years. But I think it's still very important that we start today to have some antibiotics in the near future. If it is phytobiotics for animals, I think it can take much less time. We hope to, feed the animals with this product, with these plants. And for the cosmetics also, maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 years, and we will have some plant extract for the livestock or for the cosmetics.
Yeah, that would be so interesting, especially if we can see it available at our local pharmacy. So even in terms of a plant-based antibiotic, any idea as to how long we can see that available at our local pharmacy?
I don't know, hopefully 10 years maybe, and we have to start, and this is the World Health Organization who is pushing to say, okay, we need to find new antibiotics, because the pharmaceutical industry basically quit a bit this topic, because it's not very rewarding in terms of money. You develop an antibiotic, it's quite expensive, and then you will have antibiotic-resistant bacteria coming up quite quickly. But still, we don't want to arrive to this situation where they say that if we don't do anything by 2050, we will have 10 million of people dying of this antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which is huge. Today we have 700,000 worldwide, which is a lot, less than what we had for COVID, but we need to do something today.
Absolutely.
And so,
yeah. Absolutely. It's amazing. Thank you so much for your expertise, Dr. Kernes. Dr. Sophie Kernes is a microbiology researcher at Lethbridge College. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Janet.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.